In many ways, we live in an age of self-promotion. We're constantly barraged in the traditional and social media with images and messages from celebrities and others about how wonderful they are, right? How strong, how smart, how fast, how good-looking, how successful, and so on. And we're often urged to talk about ourselves in similar terms, to promote ourselves on Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, or Twitter. One of the consequences of this is an overwhelming anxiety in our time about how people perceive us, especially in social media. And so we often find ourselves primping our profile in this or that social media app, taking carefully staged pictures, or sharing updates that are calculated to make people think that we're wonderful in one way or another. I suspect this cultural trend is closely related to the explosion of concern for the shape and appearance of our bodies, far beyond what's been the case in the past. A yearning for perfection, at least in the eyes of others, has become a preoccupation of our time. This is interesting to me because the idea of perfection is one of the distinctive features of the letters of Hebrews and James in the New Testament. But it's conceived in very different terms than it is in American culture today. Listen to what the author to Hebrews says in chapter 12. Since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us also lay aside every weight and sin which clings so closely, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured from sinners such hostility against himself, so that you may not grow weary or faint-hearted. Across Hebrews, Jesus is held up as an example of a perfect person in the sense of being perfectly obedient to his Father. And the author is careful to emphasize that his perfection came about through his experience of suffering. James conceives of perfection in similar terms. At the very beginning of his letter, he writes, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be perfect and complete, not lacking anything." Both Hebrews and James call us to become perfect people, perfect in obedience to God, our Father. That's already a very interesting thing to observe, I think. We can sometimes slip into the idea that God is content with the way we are at present, and has no particular goals for us in our lives. And this is very far from the truth. His purpose in saving us is that we should become like his Son, perfect in obedience to God. No less striking, though, is the way in which this perfection is achieved in the Christian life. In chapter 5, the author to the Hebrews writes, "Although he was the Son, he learned obedience from what he suffered. And once made perfect, he became the source of eternal salvation for all who obey him." The perfection that God is working out in our lives is forged through suffering, difficulty, and hardship. These kinds of experiences are not mistakes or oversights on God's part. They are the means that God uses to make us perfect people after the example of God's own Son. Imagine what a Facebook post would look like by a person whose perfection was the sort that Hebrews or James talks about. What kind of Instagram posts or Snapchat images would you expect to see from such a person? What would their perfection look like? As you read closely through these two epistles, Hebrews and James, consider the shape of perfection that's held out as our destiny. Consider also the things that are said about how that perfection comes about in our lives. We hope you enjoyed this brief glimpse into one of our courses at Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary. If you would like to learn more about the programs of study that we offer, please contact our admissions department by clicking the link below.